Okay. Let me just make sure the sound is properly working. Boom. Just hold on 2 seconds while I double check that everything's working properly. Is this working? Let me see. Okay, I think this is working. Perfect. Yeah, so we're just waiting for Daniel to join. Oh, he's joining now. I'm just gonna bring him on. Okay. Hey Daniel, how are you doing? I can't hear you, Daniel. I don't hear any audio sound. I can see you, but I can't hear you. I don't know if you can hear me. Can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me? Okay, you can hear me. I just can't hear you. I still can't hear anything.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yeah, now I can hear you
Okay,
perfectly. Okay,
perfect.
anyway, as I said, we're live. I'm joined by Daniel from the Jesus Conversation. I would recommend you guys subscribe to Daniel's channel. Check it out. He has great content there, all things Bible related, apologetics related, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, welcome to the video, Daniel.
Great to be here, Adam. Thank you so much.
Okay, so yeah, the topic of today's discussion is exactly the same as last week. Where Daniel and I are going to essentially run with this as long as we can.
Mhm.
The idea here is to give you guys a platform to come on and to discuss and to defend your faith. As I've said weeks and weeks before, and even when Daniel's been here as well, we're not Muslim, obviously, but we are investigating Islam. We are studying not just the Quran, but we're also looking at the Hadith, and we're just not convinced, guys. There's nothing convincing about your religion. Now it's up to you to come on and suggest or prove to us otherwise, but based on everything we can see, we have no reason to believe, for example, that Muhammad is a prophet. We
Mhm.
have no reason to believe that the message of Islam is true. There's nothing logical about Islam at all on any level. There's nothing, I would say, it's hard to explain, but there seems to be nothing truthful enough about the religion that would deem it to be worthy of consideration to the point that you'd commit your entire life to it in terms of following it, following the ethos, following the ethics, following the God of the religion. It all seems to be fabrication and not true. Um, so yeah, I'll just stop there for a moment. I'm going to bring up in a second a hadith as to why, and then Daniel can bring up some other hadith as well as to why we don't follow Muhammad, particularly because his moral and ethical example is utterly despicable, which we're going to show you. For example, I have a hadith here where Muhammad calls women dogs.
Mhm.
And I want you guys to respond to it because, in other words, think of it this way: if you're a married Muslim man, according to Muhammad, your wife's a dog. If you're okay with that, that's fine. Own it, but don't turn the other cheek to what he says, okay? Because these are the things he says about women. He says horrific derogatory things about women. He treated women in that way, okay?
Mhm.
We know that from the hadith, and I'm going to bring up hadith later where he abuses women, okay? He treats them as just pure sex objects, nothing more than that. That's literally what they were to Muhammad. And yeah, I'll stop there for the moment. Is there anything you'd like to add, Daniel?
I'd say I completely agree regarding the fabrication and the lies, um, because many different aspects that we examine, whether it's historical, you know, accuracy of the Quran, if it is the word of God, it fails in many different aspects. The biggest thing for me was people telling that it is uncorrupted, and that it was directly passed down from Muhammad. When I discovered that, and having understood that the Islamic scholars knew that was not the case, and
Yeah.
still the polemics of the 1970s up till 2000s was entirely based on this. So even the propagators of the religion, when they know something wasn't accurate, and that's what they chose to, put forth, and then proceed to, penalize or pass on derogatory comments against the Bible and Christianity. That was the biggest form of deception, and it wasn't ethical, it wasn't honest. So that really puts a bitter taste for me regarding Islam. There are other reasons as well, but this would be one of the things.
All right, Daniel. While I'm going to type something here in the chat. While I type it, I want you to read this hadith to the viewers, and I want you to explain it to them in terms of what Muhammad is saying about women here, just so they understand his viewpoint on women. If
Yeah.
that's okay.
Okay, sure. So it says, narrated Aisha, the things which annul the prayers were mentioned before me. They said, prayer is annulled by a dog, a donkey, and a woman. If they pass in front of the praying people, I said, you have made us. Then Aisha says, I said, you have made us, that is, woman, dogs. I saw the Prophet praying while I used to lie in my bed between him and Qibla. Whenever I was in need of something, I would slip away, for I disliked to face him. Yeah, I mean, this is very clear. In a single sentence, you're talking about dog, donkey, and a woman. If there is any kind of, similitude based on language, grammar, the woman is being compared to a dog and a donkey. And this is ratified by the fact that, Aisha actually makes the comment that you have made us women as dogs. And there is no rebuttal, there is no response from Muhammad saying that's not the case. Then she also proceeds to explain the experience that she had. She used to dislike facing Muhammad when he was praying. And, if a woman and a donkey and a dog can annul prayer, it would be very harmful for her if she's lying between the Qibla and the Prophet. And, I think that's what she's narrating here, that she disliked, to face him during those moments when he was praying. And she would just slip away. This really feels like she wasn't uh, she did not get the feeling of being accepted or being an equal before God, together with Muhammad, and especially other men, in the sense that women are not the same as man in Islamic paradigm. um, yeah, I think so that's what I get out of it, that you have a very derogatory kind of image that a woman is being given within Islam. And talking about prayer being annulled by something, this is a very big thing, because prayer is a relationship or a communication between God and a person who is praying, a man. And if someone else has the power of annulling that prayer, then it's really no good, right? Like you're calling to help to God, and if a woman passes in the midst, then the prayer is annulled, or a dog or a donkey, doesn't make any sense. So even in terms of the spiritual um, strength of the religion, uh, this is not a positive thing for me, because I can't accept that someone can just annul my prayer. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. And how would you feel, again, like, you're married, Daniel, so how would you feel if you were part of a religion where that's literally how your wife is being classified? She's classified as a dog. Like that's literally her place within Islamic culture, right? Within Islamic within the religiosity of Islam. She's a dog. That's her class, that's what she's assigned to, and that's how she's to be treated. How would you feel about that?
Yeah, I wouldn't feel good myself, because treating a fellow human being with such utter disregard, and it's not good. But it depends on who you're talking to, because narcissist, someone who is very much, aggressive and controlling behavior, they may like this kind of a religion, where you subjugate women to their place, put them in their place. They're only made to serve, in the sense that they don't have any respect or dignity or equal standing, but they're only there to serve you like a robot or a slave. And especially, this is not even talking about a slave, it's talking about a woman that you married. So that's a different standing.
Yeah, and the other thing as well is, Muslims might argue, for example, they might say, well, doesn't Jesus say the same thing in Matthew 15? No, That's
No.
not the case.
Mhm.
And then I'm going to ask the ignorant Muslim who wants to suggest that or insinuate that, what's the Greek word that Jesus uses in that particular chapter? They don't know, Daniel. That's
Mhm.
the spoiler alert. They have no idea what he says in that chapter. The
Yeah.
Greek word that's used in that chapter is kunarion. Kunarion is the Greek word for puppy. If you read any critical commentary on Matthew 15, so for example, R.T. Francis one, or John Nolan's critical commentary on it, they both say very clearly the Greek in that particular context. What Jesus does is he takes out, right, any derogatory, right, or any sort of what would you call it, like sexist connotation with that term, right?
Mhm.
And what he instead does is he completely softens it to open up the possibility, right, that it doesn't matter essentially who you are, your gender, any of that stuff. What matters is your faith,
Mhm.
because that Canaanite woman is measured by her faith. She's not measured by anything else. She's not
Yeah.
measured by her appearance. She's not measured by her gender. She's not
Mhm.
measured by. That's why he takes it. He changes the term from dog to puppy. Now, interestingly enough, Muhammad comes back, comes along 500-600 years later. Daniel, what does he do? He doesn't change and take out the derogatory stuff, right? He reinforces it back to what certain viewpoints that existed back then were, right? Which
Yeah.
is now he goes back to the full dog term.
Mhm.
He just calls him a dog,
Yeah.
or them a dog rather. So yeah. So if that's going to be your point of contention, that's not what it says in Matthew 15. Check the Greek. You're not Greek scholars. None of you are. You're just ummis like your prophet. So go and check the literature. The other thing I just want to point out, and we're going to get into some examples in a minute. I put this link, this comment rather, in the chat, just about the crucifixion, because like I still don't understand why any single person today has to make an argument for the crucifixion to a Muslim. It's absolutely bizarre.
Mhm.
Like, you guys can't be that much of an ummi to like, as much as your prophet was, to ignore the fact that all of academia is consistent on this. What comment did I put in the chat, Daniel? Can you read that, please?
Yeah, it's quoting from Ehrman 2012 publication, Did Jesus Exist?
Yeah.
It quotes, nearly all critical scholars agree to these points, that is, the crucifixion of Jesus, about the historical Jesus.
So he's saying that all critical scholars agree that this was a historical event that took place in relation to the historical Jesus.
Yeah.
Now, the reality of it is if all of scholarship is unanimous on this, all of academia is unanimous on this, why are they unanimous on this? Okay. So if a Muslim wants to come on and say, well, you don't have the type of evidence we're looking for that's sufficient for us, then my question would be why is it sufficient for them?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
what are they going to do at that point? Are they just going to special plead and say, well, we go with the Quran because the Quran says so? I don't care what the Quran says. I care what the evidence says. And if you want to stipulate that this was an invented scenario, okay, you could argue that it was perhaps invented by his followers, but it wouldn't make sense that it was invented by his enemies.
Yeah,
Okay?
absolutely. Yeah.
And on top of that, his followers, like, here's the thing, right? There's a thing within theology, right? Within biblical studies called the criterion of embarrassment. Okay? It's essentially what are the chances that Jesus's own followers would make up his own crucifixion? So think of it this way: if Jesus is the King of Kings, okay, and they view him in this highly exalted way, what like, if they were going to make something up, Daniel, the thing they'd make up is, yeah, he marched into Jerusalem, he took over the entire place, and he became the king seated upon the throne. That's the sort of thing they'd make up. They wouldn't make up that their most revered king, right, literally went through that kind of suffering and humiliation on their behalf and on the behalf of all of humanity. That's not the thing you'd make up. Okay? Because when you look at, just generally speaking, mythology in the ancient world, it always paints a picture of the leader in the best possible light.
Yeah.
Right? To mitigate or to limit any form of embarrassment that may have taken place. So that's what we call the criterion of dissimilarity. The fact that both Jesus's followers and his opponents in the first century with the documents that we have, not just the Gospels, but also, for example, what's it called? The Flavius Testimonium by Josephus, and then the work that Tacitus did. The fact that they're both in total agreement on this, that's why historians, through their methodology, come to the conclusion with 100% certainty that this event is a historical event. Okay, and they call it a fact. It's not conjecture. When Surah Al-Nisa verse 157 says they're being led by conjecture, what conjecture? No one's here surmising whether he was crucified or not. All of academia is saying it absolutely 100% happened. Right? And how can they say that unless they're 100% sure based on the evidence that they have?
Yeah.
It's only you guys have the blinders on, and you want to special plead your way out of that argument, that you're just going to totally ignore it and go with what the Quran says, even though the Quran is just ripping from an old Gnostic tradition from the 2nd century, and maybe even the late 1st century. Okay. Is there anything you'd like to add, Daniel?
No, I think the writing is pretty clear. The earliest sources tell us that this man was most certainly crucified. And just like you pointed out, they did not have any incentive to portray their leader as someone who died a horrible death at the hands of his, the rulers, Roman executioners, which fell to the ploy of the Jewish leaders again. So that would not be a story that anybody would like to, propagate. Then comes the fact that, okay, if he died, then where is the body? That adds to the power of the Christian faith that although this man was most certainly crucified, but they could not find the dead body, alluding to the evidence of resurrection again there somehow. But that's for the later point, I think. But for now, this is very clear. No one has agreed. No critical scholar, just like Adam pointed, has agreed or conceded the fact that there could be a slip. Almost all of them agree that this man most certainly died on the cross.
100%, and that's the universal opinion within academia.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's go on to this one. Interestingly enough, in Islam, one of the categories for what determines a prophet is from the type of lineage they come from. So, in other words, and I remember this from discussions I had with other Muslims on different streams. They said that he had to be from good lineage, like his parents had to be basically God-fearing.
All right.
So, like, for example, when you look at David's dad, Jesse, was a God-fearing man.
Mm-hmm.
And they're kind of drawing from that tradition, right? That kind of link, right? Because in the Old Testament, there's like this kind of connection between the prophets and, their ancestry going back as far as Adam. And then you have obviously a continuation with that in terms of Jesus being from the line of David and all that kind of stuff as part of this prophecy fulfillment thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to just show Muslims something. Well, I'll just read it just so you guys can understand. And guys, don't get offended. This is what your literature says. Like the last one that, unless you're a Shia, then you can ignore it. But if you're a Shia, then there's other problems. You're going to have to, if you're a Shia, please come on. And I want you to answer some Quran verses without appealing to the Hadith, because you're going to really struggle then. But anyway, the Hadith that I've shown so far, they're just, they're Sahih grade. I want the Sunni Muslims to know, right? This is part of your sunnah, right? You have to accept Sahih grade Hadith. If it's good Hadith, reliable, the chain of narration is strong, you have to accept it. Okay? So don't get offended by it. If you get offended by it, Daniel and I would just say that's the Spirit convicting you. That your whole religion that you're holding on to is complete baloney. Right? That's what the Spirit is doing. But you just, again, if you want to keep the blinders on, so be it. But it's not going to lead you to where you want to go. But anyway, let me just quickly read this. This is Muhammad talking. So this is Momo talking. I sought permission to beg forgiveness. I sought permission to beg forgiveness for my mother, but he did not grant it to me. I sought permission from him to visit her grave, and he granted it permission to me. So in other words, what's going on here? He's asking, this is Momo, right? He's asking Allah, can his mother have forgiveness, right? Because she's in hell.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Allah says, no, she's not going to be forgiven. She's going to stay where I've put her. Okay? Because this idea of, there is this kind of low-key idea within certain hadith that Muhammad does act in some sense as an intercessor between Muslims and Allah, right? That's why you have to, as part of your salat, you pray 5 times to Muhammad, okay? The idea there is that if you pray for him, he can be exalted enough that Allah will listen to him, and then his intercession will basically increase or magnify your chances of getting into Jannah. Okay?
Mhm.
This is a theology that exists within Islam, by the way. Now, not all Muslims subscribe to that, but some do. Some do believe in that. Okay? Some of the hadith actually do insinuate that. And that was an area of contention within Islamic theology as it developed, the centuries after Muhammad's demise.
Mhm.
But basically, he's asking here. Now, it's, by the way, the same applies to his father. His father died outside of the fold of Islam, so his father is also in hell. But if your guy's argument is as part of what determines whether a prophet is a true prophet of God, one of those arguments is that he has to be of good lineage. How can you say that about Muhammad when both his father and mother are burning in hell?
Yeah.
Can you explain that to me, Daniel?
There is no excuse for it, if that is the criteria. And we do see that biblically, even John the Baptist, his parents were godly, they were serving in the temple. Yes, I mean, there is no lineage, there is no continuity, and it's just bad stuff.
When you look at the two before John the Baptist,
Mm-hmm.
right, you have the two before Momo, sorry, not John the Baptist, the two before Muhammad. You have, as you said, Daniel, you have John the Baptist, right, who is regarded by Jesus as the greatest among men.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then you have, after John the Baptist, you have Jesus, who is not a prophet, but he is the prophet.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The prophesied messianic prophet who's also divine from the Old Testament. Okay. But that's, when you look at, as Daniel said, both of their lineages, Joseph, let's just go with Jesus for a moment. Joseph was God-fearing, and that's made abundantly clear. He's from the line of David.
Yeah.
Okay. His mother was also God-fearing. Okay. Because how do we know that? When God appeared to Mary, what did God say, right, to the Blessed Virgin when he appeared to her? He told her, right, blessed are you among women, right? You have found favor, right, with God. How can she have found favor with God if she's not God-fearing, Daniel?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the implication there is quite clear. Okay, with both Mary and Joseph, and then, as you said, Daniel, exactly the same with the parents of John the Baptist.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Elizabeth and what was the name of the husband?
John. Zechariah, I think.
Zechariah, yeah. And we know this from their encounters with God. Okay, it's framed that way.
Yeah.
Then Muhammad comes along, Daniel, completely breaks that tradition and has a mom and a dad that are both polytheists, worshipping separate from Allah, and then because of their disobedience end up in hell.
Mm-hmm.
We're that's a total break in the chain of narration, no? As far as the prophetic tradition is concerned.
Mm-hmm.
At least to me, that's how it seems. Okay. Let's go to Sahih al-Bukhari 304. And by the way, Daniel, if you have anything you want me to read out and go to, feel free to shout it out and we'll go there. If you brought anything.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to get this one up. Oh yeah, here we go. Oh boy. This is the infamous Sahih al-Bukhari 304, where Muhammad says women are inferior. And the witness of 2 women is equivalent to 1 man, right? So the value of a woman is half to that of a man, according to Muhammad. We're not going to read all of this, obviously. But essentially, the idea here, and again, guys, take note, go through it, and you'll see exactly what Daniel and I are talking about. So he passed by some women, and he said, what? O women, give alms, as I've seen that the majority of the dwellers of hellfire were you women. So Muhammad's saying the majority of people in women the majority of the people in the hellfire are women, right?
Mm-hmm.
They asked, why is it so, O Allah's messenger? He replied, you curse frequently, and are ungrateful to your husbands. I have not seen anyone more deficient in intelligence and religion than you. So he's saying they're deficient in intelligence, so they're inferior intellectually. Okay, fine. That's Muhammad's view of women. You're intellectually deficient. You're intellectually inferior to a man. A cautious, sensible man could be led astray by some of you. The woman asked, "O Allah's Messenger, what is deficient in our intelligence and religion?" He said, "Is not the evidence of two women equal to the witness of one man?" So, in other words, what he's saying there is, if a woman tries to make a case, right, or be a witness, her witness is so bad because again, this is the deficiency in her intelligence. She can't put together a good witness because she's intellectually deficient. She needs another woman with her for both of them to have enough together to be able to put together a strong enough witness. Whereas with a man, you just need one man. That's what he's saying. Again, he's qualifying his statement of what he means by intellectually deficient. Okay, and then he goes on to blame them for the fact that they menstruate. Okay, and then that's also why they're inferior. But like, here's the thing, right? If we analyze this statement very carefully, Daniel, who created these women that way?
Yeah, it has to be Allah.
So Allah basically created women deficient in intelligence with menstruation, right? Okay, He created them that way, and then Allah is blaming them for how Allah created them.
Yeah.
Muhammad, sorry, is blaming them for how Allah created them.
Yeah.
Like, that's complete. Like, that doesn't make any sense at all. You're blaming them for something that's totally outside of their control. It has nothing to do with them. If anyone should be blamed for this, it should be Allah. Because how can he consider himself to be a just judge and a just God if he has created women in such a way that they have less of a chance than man to get to Jannah because of how he created them? Because he purposely put more obstacles in their way.
Yeah.
Explain to me how that's fair, Daniel.
It's not, it's like the game is rigged against the woman. Somehow the so-called Allah is against the woman ending up in paradise. Because also, if you observe here, he's saying the third line from the bottom, I think fourth, isn't it true that a woman can neither pray? So it's not a matter that they can choose not to pray. They can neither pray nor fast during menses. And if you see at the time of judgment, apparently Quran comes up and it argues for the believers, and he recounts all the instances where they prayed certain surahs and all that. So if a woman will be measured against a man, and if they lose 5 days in a month, at least they're going to be severe shortfall of the merits that they will need to enter into paradise. So it's very difficult for a woman. That maybe that's why he's saying I have seen that most of the women are not in heaven. They're going to hell.
Yeah. Now we're going to go on to women getting beaten and punched in Islam because they're a woman. This one in particular is extremely disturbing and disgusting, because the woman, and she's not even a woman in this case, because she's actually a child.
Okay.
Right? She hasn't matured to the point of being a woman yet. We're talking about Aisha. Okay, she's a child. She's physically a child, right? But look at what happens in this hadith. Again, this is Sahih grade. And again, you guys have to answer for this, okay? And I'm telling you guys, please, if you feel that conviction, do something about it. Don't just sit there and turn the blinders on and pretend this stuff isn't true. As I said, according to Muhammad, women are dogs. According to Muhammad, they're inferior in intelligence. Okay, and not only that, they're just purely their sex objects. That's their value and worth in Islam, and it's also their value and worth in Jannah, as we'll see later, because that's their purpose in Jannah, to be that for man. Okay, it's total misogyny. But here we go. Abu Bakr, like, the chapter title is "Whoever teaches manners to his family or others." So this is Islam's idea of teaching manners, Daniel.
Wow.
So Abu Bakr is a fully grown man, Daniel. Aisha is a 9-year-old child, and she's the wife of Muhammad. Okay.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's so much wrong in that in and of itself, but putting that aside, she's a child. He's a fully grown man, and by the way, he's just a stranger to her. Okay. He's not. She's like, Abu Bakr is not her husband. Okay, but look at what he does. Abu Bakr came towards me and struck me violently with his fist. Again, Even in the translation here, they try to slightly lessen the blow a little bit. It's violently punch.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what the Arabic is. It's a full force punch. Can you imagine, Daniel, if there was a 9-year-old kid in front of you and you punched that kid with full force? Doesn't matter where you punch that kid, it's going to cause some serious damage.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay?
Yeah.
It's a form of abuse. That's literally, it's nothing more than that, right? It's a form of abuse. Abu Bakr comes forward and he punches Aisha full force. And then this is what he says: "You have detained the people because of your necklace." So this is him disciplining her. Again, I don't know what gives Abu Bakr the right to discipline her, because I can tell you for a fact, Daniel, if Abu Bakr was to discipline, let's say I have a kid and he comes forward and he does that, someone would have to restrain me. Right? I wouldn't tolerate that.
Yeah.
Okay. But I remain motionless as if I was dead, lest I should awake Allah's messenger, although that hit was very painful. So Aisha is there saying the hit was very painful, and she didn't want Muhammad to wake up. And I actually think there's an insinuation within that if Muhammad had woken up, he would have hit her too for waking him up.
It seems like that. Yeah.
Yeah, if you read it very carefully, I think that's what she's getting at. So imagine she just got hit full force, Daniel. She can't even cry out. She can't even say anything, because if Muhammad wakes up, he's going to beat her probably worse than Abu Bakr did. That's his character. That's Muhammad's character. That's who Muhammad was. And this is the guy you follow. Now, if you're okay with it as a Muslim, take ownership of it. If you're a Sunni Muslim and you're okay with this, take ownership of it. But don't play the game of pretending that Muhammad is this or he's that, or he didn't do this or he didn't do that. It's right there in front of you. And you guys have to come to terms with it. Okay.
Also, it almost seems, the entire narration seems like it's like a common event, meaning it's not something that is surprising her or something that she needs to raise an alarm about. Any person would go to their husband, make some noise to be delivered, right? But she takes all that for granted, and all she was worried was that she should not wake up Muhammad. So, that's a gloomy picture right there.
Yeah. And I'm going to get up another hadith. As I said, Daniel, if you think of anything, just let me know and I'll get it up.
Sure.
1664a. 64a. I think it's this one. Let me just do here. Did I put down? Oh, sorry, 14. My apologies. 1464a. Oh yeah. And I'll let that. I'm going to type something while Daniel reads this. And let me just get this up. Share this tab instead. Yeah. Just take it away, Daniel, and comment on it while I put into this chat something that I want Muslims to read.
Yeah. Is it permissible for a wife to give her turn to a co-wife? Okay, I don't understand that, but let's read that. Aisha reported, "I felt jealous of the women who offered themselves to Allah's messenger and said, then when Allah, the exalted and glorious, revealed this, you may defer any one of them you wish, and take to yourself any you wish. And if you desire any you have set aside, no sin is chargeable to you." Aisha said, "It seems to me that your Lord hastens to satisfy your desire." I think that's a perfect judgment. One of the persons closest to Muhammad was able to see and come to the conclusion that it seems Allah exists to, satisfy the desires of Muhammad. I think this is a very big red flag. Any man of God, if it happened today, you see a lot of people who claim to be men of God falling into sex scandals. It happens in pretty much every religion. Christianity has not been any exception. But if that is wrong, if the moral conscience, what we see today says this kind of a behavior is wrong, but then you see a so-called God sanctioning this lasciviousness, this unbridled sexual aggression or sexual gratification to a person who is claiming to be a messenger of God, that's a recipe for disaster. Who's going to stop him? If the man claims to speak in the name of God and everybody has to submit to this man, then he can come to any person. He can take anybody's wife, anybody's daughter, and they have to submit to him. That seems to also have been the culture, that Muhammad and his followers established. Even when they were going for crusades, they will just subjugate women, and there would be no scar on their conscience, whatever the situation, whether they were married or not. So I think, yeah, this is very bad. So, again, any Muslim watching, we would love for you to come on, um, you know, and show us and tell us why this is acceptable, and would this be acceptable to you? Imagine that, it was your wife that Muhammad desired. How would you feel about it? And would you accept the lady back into your life?
Yeah, yeah, and like I brought this point up before. I mean, if you as Muslims believe that he's the ultimate, let's say, moral and ethical example, um, how can that be the case when he had like 11, 12 wives? And we don't know definitively what the number was,
Mhm.
but let's say around 11, 12 wives. How can you say he's the ultimate example? Like, for example, if I want to practice monogamy, right, just single relationship, just one wife, and be committed to that and devoted to that, how can I look to Muhammad as an example to be a better example in the case of a union just between two persons, between a man and a woman, right? When he had multiple wives,
Mhm.
where's the monogamous example in Muhammad's example, Daniel?
Yeah, it's not. I mean, it's obvious from so many different hadiths that he was very much influenced or possessed with lust,
Yeah,
to the point that he marries his own adopted son's wife as well. Again, in the name of Allah. Apparently, every authorization comes from Allah, and it's very gratifying to Muhammad again.
yeah. Now, I also, while you were talking, again, I just put a reference in the comment section, and I'm going to read this one. So this is Muhammad Hussein Hakal. Okay, this is a like this is a Muslim writing a seerah, a biography about Muhammad, right? Reporting a historical event that took place in relation to Muhammad. Oh, you're muted, Daniel.
Yeah, I'm not talking, just talking
Oh,
to my
okay, okay,
son
no
here.
worries. But yeah, this is on page 410 of that. Now, I want Muslims to listen to this. As I said, we're talking about a Muslim, okay, uh, biographer, right, who wrote a biography, a seerah on Muhammad, reporting a historical event that happened in relation to Muhammad. So on page 410 of that, he says that there were slave women. Now, I think he specifies two. There were two slave women that Muhammad had executed
Hmm.
because they sung a song about him that was derogatory.
Yeah.
Again, two slave women that were there. Muhammad had them both executed because they sung a song about him that was derogatory. This idea, there's a line that Muslims will say, okay, uh, and you've probably heard this before, Daniel. They'll say, "Oh, he only ever killed one person."
Hmm.
It's not true, okay,
Yeah.
Daniel. If somebody has the authority to execute people, is that them killing those persons, even if they're not the one physically, throwing the knife? But if you're under my control, Daniel, and I tell you, Daniel, kill that person there, am I the one who's essentially killing that person by ordering you to do it?
Yes, of course. It's like you saying, I hold a knife in my hand and I stab somebody, but it's a knife that killed the man, not me.
Yeah,
The knife was just an instrument. So when you send your messengers or slaves to go and do the job, it's you actually that is responsible for it.
yeah, yeah. And that's exactly the point. Muhammad had tons of people killed, tons of people,
Mhm.
and it ranged from different reasons.
Yeah.
Okay, it was either in wartime situations when he was going in violently, taking over areas, subjugating them, and then basically chopping down any opposition that got in his way, or with his slaves. If his slaves said something he didn't like, he just had them executed. So two women, as I said, they chanted a song about him that was derogatory. He just said execute the two of them. There's
Mhm.
another instance in the seerah where this Jewish poet, he writes a poem about Muhammad that's derogatory, and Muhammad says, "Which one of you will kill him for me?"
Mhm.
And then one of his followers says, "Oh, I'll do it. I'll do it. I'll do it. Oh, Allah's messenger." Um, so that's the type of influence that he had, and that's the sort of stuff he was ordering his followers to do. Okay. Um, where will we go from here? There's so much stuff we could do. Boom. I'm going to show this one because this one's rather interesting. Okay. Share this tab instead. So this is Surah An-Nisa verse 124. Or sorry, not 124. This is Surah An-Nisa verse 24. The context here, and you guys can look into this by reading the tafsir on this. I recommend you go to that website. I think it's called QuranX.com, where it has the unabridged version of the tafsirs. Because one thing Quran.com does that I don't like is, for example, with Ibn Kathir, it has an abridged version. So what an abridged version is it's an edited version of the same commentary. So in other words, what they do with Ibn Kathir says a lot of stuff that Muslims today don't like, Daniel. So the abridged commentaries on Ibn Kathir are the edited ones where they take out the statements by Ibn Kathir that they don't like.
Yes, yeah, they do that, yeah.
But if you want the unabridged true version, go to QuranX.com. That's where you'll find it. But anyway, the context here, and you guys can read it in your own time. It's chapter 4, verse 24 of the Quran. Look at the tafsirs, look at the context, and you'll see exactly where I'm coming from in a minute. But basically, this was a verse that he said was revealed at a time when he was subjugating areas, okay? And basically, his followers were asking him, "Oh, Muhammad, what do we do with the captives, with the female captives who are married?" Because Muhammad was telling them it's okay to have sexual relations with them. These were married women. And he was telling them, no, it's okay, defile them. But his own followers didn't feel good about doing it, Daniel. They had a better moral and ethical compass than Muhammad himself, because they were being convicted enough to know this isn't right.
Yeah.
And they came up to him and said, we don't feel good about this, Muhammad. Like what should we do? And then that's when Muhammad said, oh, this verse was revealed to me. And in this verse, what he tells them is, all those whom your right hand possesses are lawful for you to take. The way that that's understood, at least from the commentaries on this particular verse and chapter, is that what Muhammad was telling them is, as long as they're not pregnant, you can defile them. Doesn't matter if they're married, just as long as they're not pregnant.
Yeah.
Okay? Can you imagine that, Daniel? These women, right, who have been, like, they've done nothing to deserve this. They're part of maybe a small culture or land in the surrounding area of the Arabian Peninsula. Muhammad comes in by force, takes everything, loots everything, acts like a total pirate because he was, okay? And then the women that are there with their husbands, that are left, that are captives, imagine then all these Islamic men come in on top of them and defile them.
Yeah.
Right? Like, where's the mercy in that? Because doesn't one of the verses in the Quran say Muhammad was a mercy to mankind, Daniel?
Yeah, I was just wondering, how is he, exactly the same question, how is he a mercy to mankind, and how is he an ideal to follow in, I was about to say in today's age, but even back in that age, it would not be ideal, because a higher standard was already set by Jesus.
Yeah. And by the way, just in case those are wondering, because I want to bring this up, Jesus was what we call, again, I'm coming at this from a purely academic perspective for a moment. There is a thing called Jewish apocalypticism, okay, which was a different genre or a different interpretation, right, of the Jewish scriptures, because they were focused on essentially eschatology, okay, the coming of the kingdom of God, okay, which is what Christ consistently proclaims, right, in his message, that the kingdom of God is at hand, okay. Yeah. And this was a part of Jewish apocalypticism, okay? John the Baptist was also an apocalyptic Jew. Paul the Apostle was also an apocalyptic Jew, okay? So one of the key tenets of Jewish apocalypticism was that non-violence, Daniel. Because what they believed was God would take vengeance upon the injustices that were done against them. All they had to do in the meantime was be faithful to God, loyal to God, love their enemies, bless those who curse them. All that kind of stuff. And then when God comes in his glory, right, he'll take vengeance upon the wicked, right, who didn't repent, who didn't relent of their wickedness, right, who carried out all those injustices. God will bring justice on behalf of his true sons and daughters. That was the view, okay? That's why they were completely against violence. John the Baptist was completely against violence, okay? Jesus was completely against violence, okay? Paul even quotes Jesus when Jesus talks about, blessing those who, who curse you and love your enemies. He quotes that in his epistles. Okay. So like that was a completely different, philosophical, like moral way of living than what Muhammad introduces 500-600 years later. Muhammad just goes back to the full tenets of implement violence, implement slavery, injustice, all that kind of stuff, right? And don't treat people fairly, right? Just completely just focus on eradicating your enemies if they don't submit themselves to you. That was Muhammad's philosophy, and that's what he was led by with any country that he went into. And then you have obviously the misogyny thrown in there with that, like this extreme form of misogyny.
Yeah.
Yeah. But as Daniel said, that's a complete and total U-turn and regression from what Jesus brought when Jesus was, walking among us. Okay, in that physical form. Okay, completely different. Okay, and remember, Jesus came 500-600 years earlier than Muhammad. Okay, when God became incarnated. Okay, so it's like, if anything, Muhammad, like, you would have thought 500-600 years later things would have progressed further, right? As opposed to just doing a complete U-turn and regressing.
Yeah.
And that's why I think the guy's called John of Chrysostom. I can't remember exactly the full name, or is it John of Damascus? When he commentates, he was a 7th century, either 7th or 8th century church leader. He has one of the earliest references to Muhammad by the church in terms of the church. It's the work itself is called The Heresy of the Ishmaelites.
Okay.
Okay, and that's how he defines the Muslim movement. He defines them as Ishmaelites. And he says exactly what you said, Daniel, which is, this guy can't be from God. How can we go from Jesus, right, who brings a message of peace and loving our enemies, right, and waiting for God to do what God's going to do when he comes in his final judgment, but for us in the meantime just to remain devoted to God, right, devoted to the highest possible good, right, which is tending to the needs of those around us, loving our enemies, blessing those who curse us, all that kind of stuff. And then Muhammad comes along and does away with all of that, and then just brings a message of violence and subjugation and taking vengeance now. Don't leave it to God. I'll do it now. That was Muhammad's philosophy. Like, there's a total disconnection there. And then that's why John of Damascus, when he writes about that, I think it's John of Damascus, in his Against Heresies book, he just said, this guy can't be from God. He can't be a messenger of God. How can you go from one message to a complete U-turn? It makes no sense. Yeah. Is there anything you'd like to add, Daniel?
Yeah, let's say, for example, there are such instances in the Old Testament as well, where Elisha curses a couple of children who were calling him bald, but he cursed them in the name of the Lord. And I believe he misused his power, but apparently what I would say is he did not engage in hurting them by himself violently or sending someone to execute them. He curses them in the name of the Lord. Then the bears come out from the wilderness. They eat those children. The other example is Elijah calling down fire on armies, and the armies get destroyed. But in both of these instances, you see that they committed that to God, in the sense, they used the name of the Lord, the God of Israel, and then they curse those people. Now, the apparent challenge here would be, could Muhammad have done that? That would have been a test of his prophethood. Okay, there are people coming against him. He doesn't agree with them. He could curse them in the name of the Lord, following the precedent that is in the Old Testament. And if he was a true prophet of God, something could have happened. But what he did here, taking the sword in his own hands or sending people to kill those, that proves nothing of a divine origin or a prophethood. Nothing. He's just a mere man. And just like we've been profiling today, he was very much consumed with lust. He just wanted women. No woman was forbidden to him. And the second point that we discussed is that anytime somebody hurt his ego, he wanted to kill them, and that's a very dangerous combination. Self-absorbed, very brittle, having very inflated opinion that anybody says anything, you want to execute them. Then you just want to go on rampage, taking women from wherever you want. That's a very bad picture.
Yep, absolutely. And this, by the way, this next verse from the Quran, this is chapter 98, verse 6. This is how Muslims view non-Muslims.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're wondering if the Muslim is your friend, we're telling you with 100% Cartesian certainty, going by the Quran and going by the Hadith, Muhammad was absolutely clear, especially at the end of his life, that anyone who's not a Muslim is not your friend. They are the worst of all creatures. Okay, that's why within that early version of Islam that Muhammad brought, okay, that's why when they went into places, they just treated people like objects. If you didn't want to submit to Islam, you became a slave, right? And then if you tried in any shape or form to operate outside the confines of that slavery that Muhammad put you into, you were just executed,
Mhm.
right? Because to Muhammad,
Yeah.
you're either a Muslim, you're either with me, or you're against me. If you're against me, I'm either going to do one of two things. I'm going to make your life a living hell, or I'm just going to execute you.
Yeah.
That's how Muhammad treated non-Muslims. And we
Mhm.
see that mentality from a verse like this. Verily those who disbelieve in the religion of Islam, which would be everyone who's not a Muslim, by the way,
Mhm.
from among the people of the scripture. So let's say he in this particular verse he's targeting Jews and Christians, will abide
Mhm.
in the fire of hell. They are the worst of all creatures.
Yeah.
So we are, according to Muhammad, Jews and Christians who disagree with him, disagree with his Quran. Okay, we are the worst of all creatures, Daniel, and that's
Mhm.
how Muslims view us.
Yeah.
Now, by the way, I can go to a number of verses in the Quran where it talks about Jews as monkeys and pigs. Because again, that's how
Mhm.
Muhammad views Jews. That's how he views them.
Yeah.
And that's why you have hadith, which talk about the genocide of the Jewish race.
Mhm.
And then people wonder, well, where are Hamas getting it from? it's in their literature. This is what the sort of stuff Muhammad was espousing. He was
Uh-huh.
telling Muslims to go out and slay Christians and Jews. Okay? So if you're
Yeah.
wondering where they got it from, Hamas didn't invent this desire to want to go out and murder all Jewish people.
Mhm.
Okay, so when the Hamas leader said, for example, and I quote, this is what he said, Daniel: "It would be better if all the Jewish people could be, what's it, hoarded or it's not hoarded, collected and put in Israel so we can kill them." Where do
Mhm.
you think he's getting that from?
Yeah.
In other words, he's saying, I don't want to be chasing down Jews. I'd rather them all come to Israel so we can execute them there and then.
Mhm.
Where's he getting that from?
Yeah, from Islam, obviously, the Quran and Hadiths.
Yeah, exactly, because that's what Muhammad believed.
Mhm.
Um, Now, if you're okay with that as a Muslim, that's fine, but take ownership of it. Don't sit there and make excuses and be deceptive. I know your God is the best of all deceivers, okay? But putting that aside for a moment, just be honest with what the text says and take ownership of it, okay? Because I'm so tired of hearing Muslims say, "Well, Muhammad was not like that. He was a good and gracious man." It's not like that in Islam. We're a religion of peace. What peace? Right? How is Muhammad the mercy of mankind when we see stuff like this?
Mhm.
I can gladly and easily call Jesus a mercy to mankind because of his example.
Yeah.
Did Jesus subjugate anybody down? Was he led by the sword?
No.
Or was this the same Jesus who was turning the other cheek, right? Who literally endured all manner of suffering, right? And humiliation, right? On the part of an entire world that he came to die for because that was the kind of love that he had for them.
Mhm.
Like, where is the correlation here between that and Muhammad?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely no correlation because if you look at Jesus, there were prostitutes, they came into his presence and they were convicted. They had a heart change, but
Yeah.
I can't imagine if the same prostitute comes into the presence of Muhammad, what's going to happen. So just that one picture, same incident, if I keep side by side, that tells me the distinction is like, light and day or heaven and hell. There is stark differences between the two people, Jesus and Muhammad, and we cannot say that they're preaching the same faith.
What we actually have, I'll see if I can find it here, if I have it recorded here. But we have a reference. I think it's in the Hadith. Let me just see if I can find it here, where Muhammad essentially he has two people executed
Mhm.
um, because there was a situation of adultery. Let me see if I can find it. And if I can't find it here, I'm just going to get it up on the computer because I want people to see this. So
Mhm.
essentially, I think you know this one, Daniel. It's like he's sitting there and then he asks them to bring the Torah on a pillow, places on a pillow, and he says, "Well, what does it say therein?" Right? And
Yes.
it says, "Have them stone them." And he says, "Yeah,
Mhm.
stone them. They were caught in adultery. Stone them." Okay. That's a far cry away from what's called John chapter 7 verse 53 to John 8:11 when the woman is caught in adultery. You know,
Yeah.
neither do these people condemn you, neither do I. Okay, I don't condemn you either. Okay, now the irony in that is that Jesus could have condemned her because he was the only righteous, perfectly obedient, sinless person there, and who has ever lived, by the way. Okay,
Yeah.
and forever will live. Okay, he could have stoned her, but he doesn't.
Yes.
Muhammad, when he has the opportunity to stone someone, he stones them instantly. Okay, like again, where's the correlation there between the two, Daniel?
I mean, I can't imagine. Just imagine the situation of the crucifixion. The events leading up to the crucifixion the night before. When they come to arrest Jesus, and they are very disrespectful of who Jesus is. And Peter proceeds to cut the ear of the servant of the high priest. Jesus proceeds to supernaturally restore the ear, and from then on he was spat upon, beaten, insulted. So much was done to Jesus. But why did he not retaliate? What makes Jesus different than Muhammad? But if you put Muhammad in the same place, we can't imagine that happening, right? He would do everything to protect himself. He would send people to kill and fight. And forgiveness is not in the picture. If a man is willing to execute just for a satirical poem, but when someone comes to threaten him physically, there's going to be bloodshed. So every Muslim needs to think about this picture. Picture Jesus, how he was led, from the garden unto his crucifixion. He had multiple opportunities to call for deliverance. In fact, right when Peter strikes the servant's ear and he cuts off the ear, Jesus says, "Put your sword back into its sheath. If I want, I can call to my Father, and the Father can send 12 legions of angels." Now, that's a true prophet of God. Why do I say that? My previous references, Elijah, Elisha, they used the name of God, and then, judgment was poured out upon the other people. Jesus said, I could do that. I could call the angels, but I will not do it. Then what gives Muhammad the right to execute people? I mean, that's beyond me.
Yeah, that was just his character, Daniel. That was
Yeah.
literally his character. He wasn't a mercy to mankind. Okay, that's the
Mhm.
thing. Muhammad was not a merciful character. Muhammad was a violent warlord. Okay, so all this kind of stuff, it's a consequence of that. He wasn't a messenger of God because his behavior, as I said time and time again, and again, we're not making this up. This is in your literature. This is Sunni grade hadith. Muhammad did these things.
Yeah.
Okay, you can't run from it. Okay, as I said, you just have to take ownership of it or leave the religion. Those are your two choices. Okay, if you're being convicted enough internally that you're disagreeing with Muhammad's behavior, why sit there and blindly confess, right, that he's the ultimate moral and ethical example if your heart internally actually disagrees with that statement and betrays that statement when you're saying it? It doesn't make sense at all. The right thing to do is acknowledge it for what it is, address it, and deal with it. Okay? Let that conviction lead you, because you have, okay? And I've brought this up before, right? As Muslims, you guys believe in this idea of a fitra, right? Okay? So when Muhammad calls women dogs, okay? When Muhammad has women executed who disagree with him, when Muhammad abuses children, okay? All this stuff, okay? What is your fitra telling you about his character and about him that he did all these things? Okay? In other words, if you're okay with it, then are you okay with calling your wife a dog? With him calling your wife a dog? Are you okay with him treating women as sex objects, abusing women? Like abusing, we just saw the reference with Abu Bakr punching Aisha. Okay? If you're okay with that, fine, take ownership of it. Okay? But don't sit and preach that this is not what it is. This is what it is. The references are right in front of you. You're going to have to deal with it. Okay? And contrast that with everything Daniel and I have been telling you guys about Jesus and the contrasting examples between the two figures. There's no correlation between the example of Jesus and the example of Muhammad. Okay? Jesus was a total pacifist. Muhammad comes along and is a complete violent warlord. Where is the correlation between the two? Okay? Jesus says, and I've brought this up time and time again, right? Luke chapter 6, bless your enemies. Okay, love, love your enemies, bless those who curse you, all this kind of stuff. Muhammad comes along and says, subjugate your enemies and execute them if they do anything out of line.
Mhm.
Where's the correlation there? There's nothing there. Okay, in the New Testament, how are women to be treated? Right, all are one under Christ Jesus. There's neither man nor woman, Greek, Gentile, whatever. Okay, all are one under Christ Jesus. Okay, that's how God views women. Okay, in Ephesians 5, okay, verses 25 onwards, when he talks about how what's called men are supposed to treat their wives. Okay, how does he define that? You love them as you love your own body. Okay,
Mhm.
in other words, what you wouldn't do to yourself, don't do to your wife. Okay, so if you wouldn't allow yourself to be mistreated in that way, don't mistreat your wife in that way.
Mhm.
Right? What gives you the right to physically abuse and attack your wife, right? If you wouldn't want to be physically abused and attacked yourself. That's the whole point Paul is making there. Muhammad doesn't say that. Muhammad, on the other hand, is like, yeah, go ahead, abuse her, because she's just a dog at the end of the day.
Mhm.
And that's the man that you're looking up to as your ultimate moral and ethical example. You trade Jesus, who comes along with this perfect example, right? This perfect embodiment of what it means to follow God, okay, versus what Muhammad comes along with.
Mhm.
I feel so sorry for the people who get caught up in that and are actually blinded enough to believe that that is truly from God.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let us go to this one. This one's quite interesting. So just for context here, I want to bring this up because when Muslims try and suggest what's it called, the Torah is being corrupted, according to Muhammad, it wasn't corrupted at all, because Muhammad, like, let's just read this, okay?
Mhm.
A group of Jews came and invited the Messenger of Allah to Qaif. So he visited them in their school. They said, Abu Qasim, one of our men, has committed fornication with a woman. Okay, so he's talking about a form of adultery here. This is the example I was mentioning earlier.
Mhm.
So pronounce judgment upon them. They placed a cushion for the Messenger of Allah, who sat on it and said, bring the Torah. Wait, guys, I thought you said the Torah was corrupted and didn't exist at the time of Muhammad. Is that not your argument?
Yeah.
Daniel, what Torah did they bring if it didn't exist at the time of Muhammad?
I don't know. Muhammad. Well, apparently it came from the Jews, so it has to be whatever is with them now.
Yeah. So it was then brought. He then withdrew the cushion from beneath him and placed the Torah on, saying, I believed in thee and in him who revealed thee. Muhammad
Mhm.
believes in the Torah?
Yeah.
And he believes in the God who revealed the Torah? Okay. He then said, bring me one who is learned among you. Then a young man was brought. The transmitter then mentioned the rest of the tradition of stoning, similar to the one transmitted by Malik from Nafi. So they were stoned. Okay.
Mhm.
So he brings the Torah on a cushion. The Torah that you guys try and claim that wasn't there, yet according to Muhammad, it was there, and it was true, and it was from God, and he believes in it, right? And then he tells them to judge by it. So he gives
Mhm.
it that authority. He gives it that judgment. That makes sense. For example, why in chapter 2, verse 89, that he says that the Quran itself, right, bears witness that the Injil and the Torah is true, the one that's in their hands,
Mhm.
because it conforms with them. That's Muhammad's point. My Quran conforms with your revelations. That's how we know it's all from God. That's what he was saying. That was what he was
Mhm.
trying to convince them with. Now,
Yeah.
a lot of them didn't buy the argument. The only people that did were those who were illiterate and didn't know better. That's how he was deceiving people. But
Mhm.
those who did, they wrote in opposition to him. I gave you the example of John of Damascus. Okay, John of Damascus goes as far. I think it's John of Damascus. I might have this wrong, but we can look for the reference a little later. But I know it's there. But
Mhm.
essentially, Daniel, what he says is that Muhammad, who by chance managed to stumble upon the Old and New Testament, took those, came up with his own book, which was a perversion and a twisting of everything that was in the previous revelations that were there.
Mhm.
That's what John of Damascus says. He just says outright false prophet.
Okay.
Okay. Um, Now, whether that's true or not, we don't know. But at least according to this particular hadith, which is Sunni grade hadith, Muhammad thought the Torah was true. He thought it
Yeah.
was true and authoritative. Okay? So, guys, where's this corruption argument coming from? And if you want to go down the corruption argument, you better argue for your Quran as well, because don't be a hypocrite. Because we have a ton of references from your Akhruf, right? The Qur'an of the Quran, where they contradict each other.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, an easy question would be, which Arabic Quran is the right Quran? Which one is the true one? Muhammad commissioned how many, Daniel? Or at least, what's his name? The guy after Muhammad, Uthman.
Yeah,
At least.
Uthman, yeah.
So, which of those Arabic Qurans is true? When some of them they all contradict each other.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. You guys tell me. And if they were commissioned as all being in line with each other, then why are there contradictions there between the
Yeah.
Arabic?
There are all sorts of contradictions. Yeah, I was just saying, there are all sorts of contradictions, from the words to the number of verses and what should be in it, what should be removed. So we actually don't know, if you are actually holding the same replica that is in heaven with Allah. Apparently, if it had come down from there, that then cannot be any addition or removal. You need to know how many surahs are in the Quran that Allah has, and then we can get talking.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Because we don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know. And the thing is, because Uthman had burned all the material and the codices that were there, we can't compare.
Yeah.
Now, the only reason you'd burn them is because if you know there's a difference.
Mhm.
That's,
absolutely.
if they were identical, you wouldn't have an issue with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we can't say it's a dialect variation because that was not developed yet. It was without the diacritical marks. So apparently, you can't say they were pronouncing it in a different way, but it was a different word that he was trying to suppress.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's
Adam, I will
go.
have to leave shortly in a couple of minutes.
Okay, just let me know when you need to go, Daniel. I'll continue for a little bit and
Yeah.
then I'll wrap up. Boom. I just want to bring up this other one here. Okay. Where is it? It's Sahih Bukhari. Oh, 5094. 5094. Perfect. Gosh. I remember you brought up this one, Daniel, before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you want to read it?
Yeah. Evil omen was mentioned before the prophet. And what comes to mind? The prophet said, if there is evil omen in anything, we have to double quote that and highlight it. It is in the house, the woman, and the horse. So I don't know. He finds every evil in the woman, dog, donkey, horse, house.
Yeah, exactly what Daniel said. This is
My question, just before you go on, Adam, if he's vilifying women so much, then why did he love them so much? Every place he went, he wants the woman.
Lost.
Yeah, I mean,
lost. Because remember, Daniel, in his mind, they're just an object.
Yeah.
No, it is exactly what you said. It's really bizarre because it's a love-hate relationship.
Mm-hmm.
But he loves. In other words, he loves the flesh, but anything which is has to be spiritual. An example, that's the part he detests.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's very consistent with his theology and with the way that he was led. You look at his version of Jannah. Okay, what is his version of Jannah? For women are just there to be. So for those who don't know, this is actually in the Hadith. But basically, the way women are described in Jannah is that they're just sex objects. So what happens is they get restored to the state of a young virgin. And then the idea in Jannah is that the Muslim men, they get to marry and essentially endlessly deflower that woman for eternity.
Mm-hmm.
So every time they have relations with her, she reverts back to the state of a virgin.
Yeah.
Which is really just disturbing, nasty stuff. But again, that's the way Muhammad's mind worked. Okay, that's what he was being led by. Those were the kind of thoughts he had. Okay, and that was how he viewed women.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's in the Hadith or whether it's in the Quran, you consistently see this is how he viewed women. Okay.
Yeah.
And again, as Muslim men, you guys have to you guys have to commentate on this. Okay, if you're okay with it, fine, but come out and say that you're okay with it, right? Don't play the game of we're not sure about this. No, it's right there. It's right there. Okay, so take ownership of it. And I say this every time, and I said it earlier, right? If you're convicted convicted enough to know that this is wrong, just like Muhammad's own followers did in Surah An-Nisa, verse what was it? Was it 24? Yeah, Surah An-Nisa, verse 100. Or sorry, Surah An-Nisa, verse 24. When they came to him and said, "Muhammad, we don't feel good about doing this." Okay, if you feel the same way, why do you feel that way?
Yeah.
Okay, and why? And this is the other thing with the fitra thing, and I keep bringing this up as well, right? Universally speaking, the example of Jesus, universally across the world, is regarded as a good example, a good moral and ethical example. That's why even Dawkins will say that Jesus was a good man. Richard Dawkins, a professed atheist, will say he was a good man in the sense that he brought good morals and teachings. Okay, he was a pacifist. Sam Harris will say the same thing. Okay, and Sam Harris is another atheist. Okay, now when both Sam Harris and Richard Dawkins talk about Muhammad, it's not in the same light. They talk about Muhammad as a very dangerous, violent individual who, if you take seriously his teachings, okay, it's going to cause you to have violent tendencies, violent and oppressive and tyrannical tendencies. That's what the psychology of Muhammad will lead to if you truly adopt it. Yeah. That's what Sam Harris and Richard Dawkins were saying. That same psychology doesn't exist with Jesus. Because the psychology with Jesus is, pray for those who curse you, love your enemies, turn the other cheek. If you live by the sword, you'll die by the sword. It's the vengeance of the Lord's. It's not ours to take. Right. In the meantime, as I said, our desire should be, if we're truly sons of the Father, if the Father is the one who bestows his mercy upon all of mankind, all of his children, whether it be obedient or disobedient, that's the example you be led by. Okay, he will come in his judgment, all right, and there will be a justice. But in the meantime, that's the example we're following, right? If God is showing mercy and love to the wicked, right, to the evil in the world, then we must do the same, because he will come and make it right at a certain point. But that's not our prerogative. That's not our job. That's God's job. That's his right. That's what Jesus said, and he made that very clear. Muhammad, absolutely not. Completely the opposite. It's vengeance now, vengeance now, vengeance now.
Yeah.
Sorry, Danny, do you need to go now, or?
Yeah, I'm going to be going, Adam. Thanks for the opportunity. God bless.
Yeah, no worries. I'll continue on for a little while. Okay.
Sure.
Bye. All the best. God bless. So yeah, as I said, I'm going to wait a little bit. So feel free, guys, to come on stream. The link is there. So if you want to come on and make a case for any of this stuff, feel free to do so. I'd be happy to go through it with you. But again, I'm just telling you, this is how we feel about all this stuff. Okay. We just don't see a justification for it. Yeah. So, is there anything else? The last stream I went through, for example, the hadith that talks about Ishmael speaking Arabic, how that's a historical error. You see, a Muslim came on the last stream and he asked me the question why I don't believe in Islam. And I told him, like, for me, the case is not strong enough for Islam. Forget Christianity for a moment, right? Even if Christianity didn't exist as a religion, right, at all, right? And Jesus hypothetically never incarnated, and that was not there, right, on any level, it still wouldn't change the fact that I would never consider Islam under any circumstances, right? And I've said this before, like, if I was to rank religion, Buddhism is an infinitely better religion than anything Islam has to offer. Okay, like I read a book on the life of Buddha. I read a biography on it because I was trying to understand their religion a little bit more. Now Buddha seems to come across when you read the biography as low-key an atheist, but regardless of that, his actual example is infinitely better than Muhammad's example. Okay, so that's why I'd say, like, if you're asking me which is better, like Buddhism, 100% is I can make a far better case for Buddhism being, a religion from God than Muhammad's religion being from God. Okay. And like, what does that tell you? I don't believe Buddhism is true. I don't believe it's from God. But if you're asking me which one I would take, of course I would take Buddhism over, Islam any day of the week. because the tenets of Buddhism are just infinitely better. They're infinitely more progressive um, than anything Islam has to offer. And that's something you guys have to think of. Because at the end of the day, if this is what you're subscribing to, as I said, if you're in total disagreement with it and your so-called fitra is in disagreement with it, why are you blindly staying there, just okaying this when when internally your heart betrays you? Because the idea here within Islam is total submission. You can't be totally submitted to Muhammad and to your religion if your heart betrays you. Total submission is, yeah, you're sitting there saying, yeah, this is true. This is absolutely true, and I have no issues with it. But if your heart betrays you on that, what does that tell you? You're not fully submitted. And if you're not fully submitted, ask yourself why. Okay? And as Daniel and I have said numerous and countless times, we believe the reason for that is because that's your fitra telling you this is wrong. And you know it's wrong. Okay? So really, really consider these things, okay? Because it's absolutely despicable, right? Because I know for a fact, look, I know for a fact there's Muslim men who, if they came on and they read this, if they're Sunni anyway, at least, if they came on and they read these hadiths, they would find it almost near impossible to believe Muhammad said these things, okay? Because they would look at their wives and they'd say, oh my gosh, if he said that about my wife, I just, I wouldn't be okay with that. But no, according to your Quran, you have to be completely submitted to Muhammad. Okay, meaning whatever he says, as the messenger of Allah, according to the hadith, you have to be okay with that. Okay. So yeah, like really, really, guys, consider these things, because I just cannot see for the life of me why anyone would subscribe to this. Like, you have to literally be indoctrinated into this, right? You either have to be indoctrinated into it or you were deceived into it. Because that's what cults do. I believe Islam is a cult. It's a heretical Gnostic deviation of Gnosticism, Gnostic cult that Muhammad invented. And we know this from, at least from what I can tell, when it comes to the Quran, because the Quran talks about consistently these Gnostic groups, whether they be Jewish apocryphal groups or Christian Gnostic groups, and how essentially what Muhammad was doing was he was creating, in some sense, an amalgamation of these things while redacting them to fit his particular theological lens. That's how the Quran reads. It just reads as this hodgepodge of all these, different texts, which, by the way, as I've said before, they're in contradiction with each other, because it's like, again, what you'll find often, right, when you look at the original sources. So, for example, the Syriac infancy gospel, when Jesus is speaking from the cot or from the cradle, in the original, Jesus announces himself as the Logos and the Word of God. Yeah, the Logos and the Son of God. But in the Quranic retelling of that version, the redacted Quranic retelling of that version, he just says, "I'm a messenger." Okay, I'm just a messenger of our servant. And this is the difference, right? You can see the psychology in terms of what Muhammad's doing, right? Because remember, consistently the Quran denies the deity of Christ. Okay, so whenever he's borrowing from these stories, ripping from these older traditions, which, by the way, all of it, pretty much all of the Quran, is taking from sources, ripping from sources from the 1st century CE period up until the 6th century CE period, and there's a huge Syriac influence upon it. So when I gave this the Syriac infancy gospel, that's a 6th century text. Okay, it predates the Quran. Okay, that predates the Quran. And that's the original. Same with the infancy gospel of Thomas. Okay, when Jesus is playing with the clay pigeons, Muhammad just adds in, for example, by the permission of Allah, he does this. In the original, it doesn't say that. And the original, by the way, is, we're talking about a 2nd century Gnostic text. You can see the redaction. You can see exactly his psychology, what he's doing, and why he's doing it. So, yeah, as I said, like, this is your religion, guys. You guys have to defend this. You have to give explanation as to why you're okay with this. Okay. And if you're not okay with this, you need to introspectively ask yourself why you're not okay with it. Okay, really wrestle with it. There's nothing wrong with wrestling with God. Okay, because that's how you find the truth. Okay. One of my favorite verses is Deuteronomy 4:29, where it says, "If you search for him with all your heart and soul, you'll find him." That type of searching, in line with, I think it's Matthew 7, where Jesus says, "Ask and you shall receive." Right? Seek and you shall find. Knock on the door and it shall be opened. Again, echoing back to Deuteronomy 4:29, if you search for him with all your heart and soul, you will find him. Is that it's a search that you have to be fully willing to almost give up everything in pursuit of, right? That should be the type of desire that you have within yourself to encounter God, okay? And to receive and to accept God for who he is. Okay, because remember, you have to accept him for who he is. He is, according to Exodus 3:14, the I am that I am. Okay, meaning you can't change the definition of God. Okay, God has revealed himself as who he is, and that's all there is to it. So if God has, historically speaking, revealed himself as Father, Son, and Spirit, that's what it is. Okay, and well, that's kind of a separate discussion in terms of how the Islamic God differs theologically speaking from our Christian understanding of God. But yeah, I think I'm gonna leave it there for the time being. I'll wait maybe 1 or 2 minutes to see if anybody wants to come on. But if not, we're gonna wrap up and we'll go again next week. So yeah. Okay. So yeah, as I said, the moral and ethical example of Muhammad is an absolute dead giveaway that Muhammad was a false prophet. Contradictions. There's historical errors in the Quran. Another indication that the Quran is not from God. Another problem I have with the Quran is that the Quran is actually one of the most shallow. I'm trying to be nice here, but one of the most shallow, baseless, badly written texts that I've ever read. And I'm someone who's read a lot. I've read a lot of literature, and the Quran ranks as one of the worst that I've had to like plow through because of how it's structured. Like it's structured back to front. Like the Quran makes no sense when you're going through it, because like you start off, you're like this is the chronology. This is the thing. The Quran is regarded as a circumstantial revelation, so it doesn't read chronologically. It reads in line with how Muhammad, pieced it together. Like it's a piecemeal text of all these other texts. And as I said, they don't make sense when they're pieced together in that way and when they're redacted in that way, because there's a complete there's no chronological link or tie between any of it. So, for example, you'll start reading about Abraham, then it jumps to Jesus, then it goes back to David, then it jumps forward to John the Baptist, and back to. It just makes no sense. There's no rhyme or reason to it. And then that coupled with the fact. Oh, and by the way, like one of the Muslim claims is that the Arabic itself, people need to understand this. Muslims believe, okay, according to their theology, okay, according to their understanding of the Quran, it's divine speech and it's the greatest piece of literature ever to be produced. If that's the case, why does it read like it's utter trash? Okay, like it reads like it was written by an ummi, that it was put together by an ummi. It doesn't read like it was put together by an omniscient God. Okay, again, you guys have to answer that. Okay, like that's what you have to explain to me, as someone who's read a lot of literature, why your Quran reads like it was written by an ummi. Okay, because I cannot understand that for the life of me. Like you have that, and then on top of that, I'm going to qualify that a little bit. Norman Geisler, he has a book called Answering Islam that he co-authored with Abdul Salib, and in that they quote, when they talk about the literary value that Muslims have placed upon the Quran as regarding it as the greatest piece of literature ever written. They have but Arabic-speaking scholars, again, fluent in Arabic, scholars that have commentated on the Arabic of the Quran, that talk about there being grammatical errors in the Quran. Like the Arabic is grammatically incorrect in places, and then on top of that, the Arabic doesn't even read well in places. It's actually not well written in certain areas. Okay, so again, you have to explain that. Okay, because remember, you guys are claiming it's the greatest piece of literature to ever be produced. Why does it have grammatical errors in it? Why is it written poorly, even in the Arabic, according to some Arabic scholars? Okay, you have to explain that. Then you have as well, as I said, the historical contradictions. So, Surah Al-Nisa, verse 157, talking about how Jesus wasn't crucified. I don't have to argue that. I'll just leave all of academia argue my point for me, because according to Bart Ehrman, every critical scholar is in agreement that Christ was crucified, and absolutely so. That was just one reference. I have 10 more. Here's my challenge to you, Muslims. Provide 3 credible, non-biased, okay, so non-Muslim critical scholars that will sit there and argue that the Quranic portrayal of the crucifixion is true. Go ahead, find them, right? They don't exist, just as a spoiler, because all of academia is unanimous on that. But yeah, and then on top of that, you have the drowning of Pharaoh, chapter 10, verse 90. Look, you can argue all you want. It just says Pharaoh, therefore it doesn't specify the Pharaoh. Most of Egyptology, as far as Egyptologists are concerned, are in agreement that it's Ramses II. Even if you open it up to other pharaohs from the 19th and 18th dynastic period, and you thread a line, like, in other words, what I'm trying to say here is, if you say Moses lived around, let's say 1300 BC, give or take 100 years in either direction, and you thread all the potential pharaohs during that timeline, none of them drowned, but the Quran says that the pharaoh drowned. Again, according to Egyptologists, that's a historical error. So, for example, Peter Feynman, he believes that's a historical error. David A. Falk believes that's a historical error. Again, these are professional Egyptologists, okay? Bob Breyer, as well as a lecture series on this, believes it's a historical error. Okay, again, this is the consistent view within academia, but watch this. The Muslims are going to do their special pleading. Well, we don't believe in history, and we don't believe, like, how convenient is that? You want to believe in academia when it suits you, but when it doesn't suit you, then all of a sudden you just throw it under the bus. Okay, well, that's Islamic logic. That is Islamic logic at its finest. Okay, you want to ignore all the scholars. Okay, you want to just pick and choose. You just want to cherry pick from academia the parts that you like, even though this is the irony of it, even though the scholars that they're quoting from, the critical scholars that they're quoting from, they believe the Quran is not from God. They believe it's a historically inaccurate, ahistorical account of events, and is not from God, and is riddled with errors and mistakes. So, but those are the same scholars you want to use to try and refute other positions. It's completely hypocritical and bizarre. So the point I'm making is, you do not have a case for Islam whatsoever, right? Even putting Christianity aside, the case for Buddhism is far greater. Absolutely. Buddha wasn't a vile, nasty individual. Muhammad was. Momo was. You have to justify that. But yeah, we'll leave it at there. And lastly, just before I go, feel free to drop in the comments. If you want to at any point arrange a discussion or whatever, we can do that. As I said, and I say this every single week that we do this, I would be more than happy to spend the time going through all this stuff with you guys, to get your views on it, to get your opinion on it. But feel free to reach out, and we can do that. We can arrange that. Because unlike you Muslims, us Christians, we don't hate Muslims. Okay, I know you Muslims hate Christians and Jews and every non-Muslim, because that's what your Quran says. You hate anyone who's not a Muslim. We know that because that's what Muhammad did, right? He hated anyone that wasn't a Muslim. We know that, right? We know that Islam is a religion of violence, right? We know that it's a religion of subjugation, that Muhammad was a violent, tyrannical, misogynistic, pedophile, just every single pejorative under the sun, warlord. Okay, we know that about him. Okay, we know that with 100% Khatijan certainty, given the verses in the Quran. We looked at the Hadith, and we only looked at some. There's way more. That's not how we view Muslims. Okay, because as Jesus says in Luke 6, We actually have a verse where Jesus says, bless those who curse you and love your enemies. You don't have that in Islam. Okay, because that's not how Muhammad viewed anyone who was against him. Muhammad's view of anyone who was against him was execute that person. And then you wonder where you get that lovely sixth secret pillar of Islam from. And you wonder where you get the stuff that Hamas are doing from. You get it from Muhammad because he endorsed it and he was fully behind it. Because that was the satanic god that he was subscribing to. And again, for your own sake, guys, I pray and I hope that your eyes are open to see differently from that and to recognize Muhammad for what he was, nothing more than a deceived antichrist, a possessed, deceived antichrist, and that you guys can see the truth and be set free from it. So yeah, feel free to reach out, and until then, God bless, and I wish you all peace. I wish you all security, and more importantly, I wish you all the true presence of God in your lives, the true presence of the triune God in your lives, to recognize his desire to be with you, and for you to have salvation through him, through his revelation, and through everything he did for you, so that you may be saved. And I pray that in Jesus' name, because apart from Jesus, you're not going to have it. Muhammad will lead you only to the place where he is right now, which is in hell, which is in the hellfire. And I don't want to see any of you go there with him. So, and again, I say this to any, again, I just want, this is the other thing, right? I say this to any Muslim, no matter how deceived they are, okay? Even the ones that have insulted me, still the same. I still pray the same. I know, right, this is one of the other differences in Islam as well, right? Between Islam and Christianity. Even when you guys hate us, and some of you do, and we know you by name, the ones that hate us, we still pray for you, right? We still wish the best for you, and we still hope that, you will make it to Jannah. I know that some of the guys, some of the Muslim guys that I've spoken to, I know that they're wishing that I'm in hellfire, and they're praying for that, okay? Because that's the demented manifestation, right, of their satanic religion that they're possessed by. Okay, that's what it is. Like, how demented you have to be wishing and willing for someone to be in hell, and you have satisfaction in that thought. That's not what we desire as Christians. I know you Muslims do. At least that's what Muhammad did. So, yeah. Again, I only want the best for you guys. So, and it doesn't matter how much we disagree. We us Christians will spend as long as we need with you. Doesn't matter how long it takes to help you and witness to you. Again, God will be the one in the end who will convict your heart. We can't do that, but we can, in the meantime, testify to him, to you, and hopefully that, hopefully through God's mercy and grace, you'll encounter him for who he is, and be released from the chains of Islam. So yeah, in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.